you think I thought this was gonna be easy. Well, let me tell you, when I first set out to do this, I was a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed young man, and now I am a withered old husk of a man in desperate need of therapy. When I first dipped my toe into Muffins, I thought that was all there was to it. I thought it was just Muffins, it was Payback, and it was Derpy's first project. That's what I thought. And I was happy knowing that. And people kept telling me, no, Wildcard. No, there is so much more to this series. There is so much more. Retaina has written so much more to Muffins. There's so much more. And I hate that you were right, and my morbid curiosity got the better of me. Now, you might notice the board is it's a bit more organized than the last ones because, well, I couldn't do all of the theatrical red yarn connections I could. In fact, there are pictures. I printed out pictures for just about every story that's represented on this board. I just couldn't fit them. I could not fit them. Even downsizing the pictures, I could not fit them. Because there are 37 stories in the Muffins saga. 38 if you count Cupcakes and Bubbles. I'm counting Bubbles, so I'm going with 37. And it's a doozy. So, this is going to be probably the longest one of these I do to date. See how well that sentence ages. But before we get into this, I feel the need to give a content warning because these stories do deal with a lot of messed up subject matters. I mean, I'm talking like trigger warning, child abuse, child neglect, murder, torture, emotional manipulation, suicide baiting. There's a lot. There's a lot. First, let me explain how this is divided up, because according to the wiki, yes, Muffins has its own wiki. It was very helpful during this process. The order of the stories is kind of important because I'm going in storyline order. I'm not going in order of when they released. I'm going in chronological order in terms of the storyline. So the saga is broken up into really two, but I decided to break it up into three sections. You have your main stories where all the big plot points happen. You have your side stories, which are background / in-betweens and filler arcs, is really no better way to put it. And then you have your mad musings. These are just... We'll get into them. It's a whole thing. But without further ado, let's start this off by getting into Bubbles. Now, Bubbles is the only story that I am including here that is not written by Retaina Senshin. And that is because, by her own admission, it is the backstory that she bases her version of Derpy off of for the Muffin saga. So, with that being said, it is a series of vignettes in which we get little snippets of Derpy's childhood. Now, she has not fairly normal childhood. She has a fairly sad childhood. She has a loving father, but he's not around a lot because he has a job that is constantly needing his attention and calling him away. On the flip side, her mother is an asshole. I mean, seriously, she's abusive. She's an abusive parent. She hits Derpy constantly. She calls her names. And it eventually comes to a boiling point where in the final vignette, her mother brings Derpy to a field with a tray of soapy water and shows her how to blow bubbles. It's almost like that's the name of the story. And basically uses the bubbles to distract Derpy, who doesn't notice that her mother just leaves. Now, I'm no genius, but I think it sounds like Derpy was abandoned. So we're already off to a great start. So, moving in storyline order, the next story in the saga is the Imprisoned Pie. This chapter in the saga introduces us to Pinkie Pie's secret sister, Minkie Pie. No, that's not a joke. So this was obviously written before we learned of Pinkie Pie's real sisters' names in the show proper, so they're given the names Inkie, Blinky, and Minkie instead of their actual names of Limestone, Marble, and Maud. Creative liberties were taken here, but hey, That's what fan fiction is for, right? I would have loved to have listened to this on Ratana's YouTube channel like I did with Bubbles, but it's locked behind her channel membership for $3.99 a month, $2.99 a month. But to be honest, I'm not paying $3 just to listen to one story. Get your bag, girl. I see what you're doing, but I ain't about it. Apparently, the Pie family is very religious, and their mother, Cloudy Quartz, believes that Minkie is an evil child due to some rather concerning behaviors like mutilating herself with a rock and the difficult pregnancy that Cloudy Quartz had with her. But I can't make stuff like this up. So their rationalization, Igneous Rock and Cloudy Quartz, they say, well, you know, we don't want to go to hell for killing our daughter. Which implies the existence of pony hell, but that's a whole separate problem. We don't want to go to hell for killing our daughter, so we're just going to lock her in our basement until she passes away of natural causes. It's a foolproof plan. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that imprisoning someone against their will until they starve to death and pass away of natural causes is still murder in both the court and the eyes of God. But Minkie Pie is a fighter. You know, she survives by catching and killing small rats that wander into the basement and eating them, and off of whatever little food her mother decides to throw her. You know, it's a pretty destitute life stuck down there. She's got a blanket and a bucket, and that's about it. Eventually, she accepts that this is just her life, and that's how she earns her Cutie mark, which is a padlock. And she's going to stay down in that basement for the next 20 years. So put a pin in that. We're going to move on to the next story, which is Pinkie Pie's success. So far, these stories haven't been too bad. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of fucked up themes, like I said, with the child abuse and all this, and poor Minkie getting locked in a basement, but there hasn't really been a lot of gore. And it's kind of surprising, but I guess we're still in the stages of building background at this point. Pinkie Pie's success takes place 1 week after Pinkie sees the Sonic Rainboom and gets her Cutie mark. I'm going to read this straight from my notes because ain't no way I'm remembering this. Pinkie scrapes herself and realizes that blood somehow makes her cupcakes taste better. Don't know how that works, but okay. Pinkie then drugs and kidnaps a filly by the name of Raincloud and butchers the poor thing to harvest her blood and organs for cupcakes. The part that makes me laugh is that she just disposes of the remains by tossing them into a lava pit that's not that far from her house where some dragons live, apparently. So I guess the logic there is just, hey, whatever doesn't get burned, the dragons will eat, which is kind of smart, to be honest. She then tries to do this again to a nameless mare from her village, but this time her sisters stumble upon her. And you'd think they'd be like, hey, the fuck are you doing, sister? This is illegal. This is murder. You can't do that. But no, instead, Inkie goes, why the fuck are you doing it while they're unconscious, huh? You a pussy? There's a cave up in the mountains that we can turn into a murder cave, not to be confused with the murder basement, and we can harvest ponies while they're awake and have more fun. And so, they do that thing that I just said, with the help of their nifty number system that they developed to decide their victims. Oh god, it's the numbers again. I'm sure that'll be important later. Surely. The story ends with Pinkie Pie arriving in Ponyville to share her cupcakes and baking with the ponies of Ponyville. But we're not done with the rock farm yet, because the next chapter in the saga is Even Rocks Break. This story takes place after Pinkie Pie has already left the rock farm for Ponyville, and well, things are just getting worse for the remaining sisters there, as their parents are starting to get even more strict, forbidding them from having pets, to the point where Cloudy Quartz just stomps a lizard to death in front of Inkie Pie because you're not going to disobey me, you're my property. Ooh. Yeah, it's hitting a little close to home. She also forbids the two girls from eating cupcakes in the house because they're not a necessity. Cupcakes are good, man. Fuck is your problem? Who pissed in her cornflakes? Inkie and Blinky both start hating their parents more and more because, yeah, why wouldn't you at this point? I hate them. Blinky was the only one of the two that actually expressed her hatred for her parents. Inkie, on the other hand, just kept all of her feelings bottled up, which is totally healthy, and you should definitely do that. I'm joking. Please don't do that. Go to therapy. Express your emotions. Nonetheless, things finally come to a head when Cloudy Quartz discovers that the two girls had snuck a record player into the house, and she smashes it in front of them. And when Inkie finally tries to stand up for herself, she gets smacked across the face by her mother, and this just finally sets her off. She runs off, followed by her sister to their murder cave, not to be confused with the murder basement, and just throws a huge fit. And eventually, she earns her cutie mark by throwing a rock at the wall of the cave, which breaks, revealing a beautiful purple geode, which also ends up being her cutie mark, coincidentally. The sisters conclude from this experience that Inkie shouldn't bottle up her emotions, and it might be a little unhealthy. The story ends with Inkie standing up to her parents and promising her sister that one day she will get them out of the rock farm. It's kind of sweet. But we're not done with Inkie and Blinkie yet, because we have one more story of theirs to go over. All That Glitters. Now this may sound weird, but I actually really enjoyed this one. It's kind of like a Goonies type adventure story, right? Inkie and Blinkie are just chilling on the rock farm when their grandma, Rosie Quartz, shows up, and she tells them a story of a buried treasure that's hidden somewhere out in the mountains around the town. Their mother, Cloudy Quartz, just insists that, oh, it's just the ramblings of an old mare. Your grandma's just going senile. She's got dementia. She's losing her marbles. Don't believe her. But it turns out to be real, since Rosie takes out the map and is like, all right, here you go, kids. Go on a perilous adventure. And the two girls are just like, awesome. Thanks, Grandma. So the next morning, the two fillies follow the map to the mountains outside of town. Unfortunately, in order to follow the map, they have to climb down a cliff, and they attempt to do so with a rope, but the rope snaps, and Blinkie Pie falls into a cave where she just so happens to find the miser's treasure, a gold nugget, and coincidentally earns her cutie mark, which is a gold nugget. Meanwhile, while this is happening, Inkie runs back to the farm to get their parents, and Igneous Rock manages to get Blinkie out of the cave. And when shown the gold nugget, solid fucking gold, their mother, Cloudy Quartz, just goes, oh, is this gold? Nah, no thanks, and chucks it back off the fucking cliff. What the fuck is wrong with you, lady? That's gold. If I were as religious as you, I'd just say it was a fucking gift from God. Thank you, horse Jesus. Yeah, wait, if they're religious, that implies that horse Jesus is real. And he died for our sins. But after everybody goes back to the house, Rosie Quartz, good old grandma, climbs down the cliff and retrieves the gold nugget. But unfortunately, doing so puts so much strain on her body that it causes her to pass away from exhaustion. Only for Cloudy Quartz to cry over her the next morning when no one's watching, because everybody has emotions, even the worst person you know. Definitely a sad story, but I mean, nothing too crazy, right? I actually kind of enjoy this one as a nice little adventure romp. But we're moving on to more backstory with the element of kindness. Now, this is basically just a backstory for Fluttershy, and I mean, it's kind of sad. I mean, both of her parents are too scared to leave their house, so they don't have jobs, so Fluttershy grew up poor. But the rest of her backstory is pretty much the same with the Cutie Mark Chronicles. You know, she falls off a cloud during a flight exam, sees a sonic rainboom, gets her cutie mark for helping animals, and that's really it. With that out of the way, we're moving on to Party of None. Party of None, which is a play on the episode named Party of One, chronicles Pinkie Pie's first time in Ponyville, as she meets the cakes for the first time and starts working a Sugar Cube Corner. Fast forward a while, and Pinkie is depressed because her own baking business has yet to take off. So, to take out her anger, she wanders off into the Everfree Forest and takes her anger out by killing small animals. Yeah, that's some serial killer shit right there. Which I guess isn't surprising, because by this point she's already killed, like, a bunch of ponies. She's committed murder. So, it's really not that surprising. Tries to game end herself by jumping off a cliff, but stops herself when she realizes that her sisters would miss her. Which is honestly kind of sweet. And on her way back to town, she comes across an old castle, which I can only assume is the castle of the two sisters. But by traversing through the castle and the booby traps, she comes across a dungeon with all kinds of torture devices in it, and this gives her the inspiration to build her own workshop underneath Sugar Cube Corner. That's right, it's the origins of the murder basement trademark, baby. Very important lore. Huge lore drop. Very important. Very important. Thank you, Retaina. This is very important. So, according to the wiki, in chronological order, the next story up on the chopping block is Broken Tiara. So we have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're on 8. And I'm 15 minutes into this recording. This one takes place after the episode Bad Seed, in which Applaloom's cousin Babseed comes to visit from Manhattan and ends up being just a bully and a bad seed. Oh, I see what you did there, Larson. You're fucking smart. Smart man you are, Larson. After Babs heads after Babs heads back to Manhattan. Why is that so fucking hard to say? As soon as Babs leaves, the Cutie Mark Crusaders get immediately bullied by Diamond, Tiara, and Silver Spoon. And they go a bit too far, and I quote, "Oh, why? Because you don't have your mommy looking out for you? Oh wait, Apple Bloom, isn't your mommy and daddy dead?" Damn, girl, you're in like fucking kindergarten. Why are you so fucking mean? So Apple Bloom runs off the town straight to Pinkie Pie and is like, "Hey, can we just kill her?" And Pinkie Pie's like, "Well, you know, I kind of already had Glitter and Cocoa Bean lined up, so, but you know what, just for you, because I love you, we can do 3 at a time. It's fine." Apparently, by this point, it's revealed that Apple Bloom has been helping Pinkie with her baking for about 2 years now. That's a really long time, Christ. Pinkie lures Cocoa Bean, Glitter, and Diamond Tiara to Sugar Cube Corner under the guise of helping her taste test some products. Cupcakes for the 2 mares, and tea for Diamond Tiara because she's bougie like that and she hates fun. And if you've read any variation of Cupcakes or a spin-off of it, you know exactly how this goes. Whatever Pinkie gives them ends up being drugged, they fall asleep and wake up in the good old murder basement, baby, trademark. And this is where the fun starts. They wake up to the sound of Glitter screaming as her horn gets broken off, because magic is overpowered and not allowed in my murder basement. That's what she said, not me. It's not mine. Pinkie shows up in her classic Cutie Mark dress. Yeah, you know, the one with the cutie marks and the wings and the horn necklace. Yeah, you know. You know. If you're here, you know. And if you don't know, now you know. Diamond Tiara attempts to get them to let her go by spouting some bullshit sob story, like, "Oh, my dad doesn't have time for me." Yeah, that doesn't give you an excuse to be a bitch, sweetie. Apple Bloom, you know, does the typical thing of carving off Diamond Tiara's cutie marks and says she's gonna make them into an apron. And she does eventually make good on that promise, actually. It gets worse for Diamond Tiara because Apple Bloom then picks up a nail gun. Don't ask how she picks it up without hands. It's not important. She proceeds to put a nail in each side of Diamond Tiara's jaw to shut her up. Talk about adding insult to injury, am I right? Apple Bloom then punches Diamond Tiara in the face, giving her a black eye. By the way, Cocoa Bean and Glitter are also strapped to tables off in the corner, being forced to watch by Pinkie Pie, who has sliced their eyelids off, so they can't close their eyes. This story is actually where Pinkie gets the phrase, "Life's a party," which she later paints on her pony hide banner. Because Apple Bloom says it to Diamond Tiara, that, "Oh, life's just a big old party to you, ain't it?" And Pinkie Pie's like, "Oh, life's a party. Life's a party. That's good. I should write that down." And then she does. She actually ends up writing it with Diamond Tiara's blood. Damn, even the banner has lore. I didn't realize how deep this shit went. Anyway, they cut Diamond Tiara open and start pulling out her organs until she eventually croaks. And then the 2 bakers turn their attention to Glitter and Cocoa Bean. Next up is another side story. The Party Pony. Well, this one's pretty much just a filler arc. You know, I can't believe I'm saying that a series like this has filler arcs, but you'll know what I mean. It just gives a bit of background on how Derpy became friends with Apple Bloom and Pinkie Pie and ended up living with her in Sugar Cube Corner. I think we have most of the backstory out of the way. We still have more side stories to do, and the next story is another side story, technically, and that is Silence is Silver. I mean, if you couldn't tell by the name, this is where Silver Spoon's number gets drawn, so you know what that means. Silver Spoon, who was Diamond Tiara's partner in crime, wakes up in the good old murder basement, trademark, and sees Pinkie in her classic Cutie Mark wing dress. Yeah, you know the one with the cutie marks and the wings, and yeah, you know, I described it already. My dumbass almost said meat dress. She ain't no Lady Gaga. But before Pinkie Pie can get to work, Apple Bloom shows up and is like, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing? You said that I would get to do her if her number came up. What the fuck?" And Pinkie's like, "Ah, shit, my bad, bro. She's all yours." After some groveling from Silver Spoon, Apple Bloom actually decides that she's gonna let her go. After still taking her cutie mark, of course, because that's tradition. But Pinkie Pie is just not having it, and the two of them go back and forth about killing Silver Spoon. Until Pinkie Pie just says, fuck it, I know how to motivate you, and slits her own throat. Oh, I see. This is that grade A crazy y'all were talking about in the comments. All right, now we're finally getting into the crazy shit. Okay, I see it. This is how it's gonna be. So Apple Bloom panics and acts quickly, grabbing a first aid kit and closing up the wound. But unfortunately, Pinkie Pie has lost too much blood to survive on her own, so she essentially has to bleed Silver Spoon dry in order to keep Pinkie Pie alive, which is a crazy thing to do because you don't know her blood type. You don't know either of their blood types, and you could just end up killing both of them for no reason. But Silver Spoon dies from blood loss, and Apple Bloom's like, well, shit, it'd be a waste not to harvest her organs. So harvest her organs while Pinkie Pie recovers. That's some grade A emotional manipulation. It's like, oh, you don't want to do this thing? Well, I'm gonna kill myself if you don't do this thing. Oh, and the emotional manipulation doesn't stop there, because Pinkie does more when she wakes up a couple days later. And I quote, the exchange goes something like this. Oh, you scared the dickens out of me, Pinkie. Why'd you do that? Pinkie let out a small laugh that turned into a cough. You were slipping, she wheezed. You were losing yourself. I had to bring you back. And there's one other line in this exchange that gets me. You see, Apple Bloom tells Pinkie that this whole ordeal made her realize that she doesn't care about anybody else but Pinkie Pie, and that she doesn't have empathy for anyone. And in response, Pinkie Pie says the following. Actually, extreme acts of cruelty require a high level of empathy. And next time you have an instinct to help some pony, you might want to consider crushing them instead. It will save you a lot of trouble. Oh, this is just straight up unhealthy. And I'm a bit uncomfortable. Speaking of which, next up is Muffins. I've already gone into detail about Muffins in a previous video in this series, so at the risk of seeming lazy, I'm going to let Past Me talk about the next two stories, Muffins and Derpy's first project. Take it away, Past Me. This one legitimately made me feel a little uncomfortable, because it uses the character of Derpy Hooves. And, well, I mean, back then, Derpy's only speaking role at the time made her sound a little,
I just don't know what went wrong.
Yeah, that clip got redubbed for a reason, because it pissed off a bunch of soccer moms. I want to just clarify, it wasn't just soccer moms, quote unquote, that got pissed off by that clip. It also angered a lot of disabled people to show them being portrayed as just bumbling idiots that needed to be coddled. I just thought the soccer mom's joke would be funny. But that's a tangent we don't really have time for today. All you need to know right now is that the fandom really only portrayed Derpy in one of two ways. As either a normal character with strabismus, or as a more mentally challenged type of character. And, well, you can guess which angle this story takes. I mean, this depiction has since changed as people have grown older, and actually we've learned more about mentally challenged people and disabilities. So the story takes place 2 weeks after Pinkie Pie offs Rainbow Dash, and is now preparing to do the same to another pony by the name of Candymane. Now, I can't tell if Candymane is a real character from the show or just the creator's OC. So I just kind of used the first picture that popped up in a Google search. So Derpy comes tumbling down the cellar to the murder basement. Yeah, you know, the one. Yeah, you remember the one. And asks Pinkie Pie if she can make some muffins. And that's when Pinkie Pie got a devilish idea. And I quote, well, I was planning on making cupcakes today, but she paused, thinking. She knew Derpy wasn't stupid, per se, but she wasn't exactly like the other ponies. She seemed a bit mentally challenged, but she was sweet nonetheless. Pinkie didn't want to take advantage of Derpy's childlike mind, but she was having an idea that might actually be good. You see what I mean by how this is gonna go down the route of taking advantage of the mentally challenged? I mean, it's not insulting or anything. If anything, it makes the whole grimdark aspect of the story even better, but I guess it just doesn't sit right with me personally. At the end of the day, they're fictional characters, so who really cares? Like, I can see Pinkie Pie being a cannibalistic serial killer, but not Derpy Hoof. She's a little cinnamon. She's just a little cinnamon muffin. You know, honestly, I thought what Pinkie Pie did to Rainbow Dash was fucked up. But it's even worse what she does to Candyman. Pinkie does the typical thing, you know, cut off the cutie mark, but lets Derpy do one, and she doesn't do it right, so it ends up having to get ripped off because the cut wasn't clean. Things somehow just get worse. And I quote, "What do you think we should do, Derpy?" Well, Derpy thought for a moment, and then gave a great hop. "Ooh, can we take away her legs?" he asked happily. So yeah, Derpy suggests that they cut Candyman's hind legs off. Pinkie says, "Yeah, sure, dude. Let's do that. That's a gnarly idea." And grabs the hacksaw that's still freshly coated in Rainbow Dash's blood. Derpy takes the hacksaw name literally and tries to literally hack off Candyman's leg until she hits bone, and then she actually starts sawing through. It's like I have very like vivid imagination, so as I'm reading this, I'm like picturing it and like hearing the sounds of like the blade hitting flesh and then just like sawing through the bone, and it just makes my skin crawl. This is some good shit. "Oh no," said Pinkie Pie, "I think she's about to faint." Derpy sawed her way through the bone, and the severed leg laid limp, still strapped to the table. Candy was hyperventilating now. "Here, let me do the other one." Derpy handed the hacksaw to Pinkie, and she made quick work of Candy's other leg. She was feeling dizzy, her vision swimming. Pinkie Pie then does the old true gimmick of the good old shot of adrenaline straight to the heart to keep her awake, and it somehow gets worse. "Hey, Derpy, want to see what an eyeball feels like?" said Pinkie Pie, and Derpy nodded excitedly. Pinkie Pie took her scalpel again, along with a spoon, and got close to Candyman's face. Yeah, can't really go into graphic detail about that, or else YouTube will bonk me. But yeah, she just pops out. I mean, I guess it'd be easier if they had thumbs, you know, you could just do the old. But she pops out, she cuts out Candyman's eye, and lets Derpy play with it, and then she crushes it. Christ on a bike. We're not done yet, folks, because they then use a burning hot knife to draw on Candyman's skin. What the fuck? Who comes up with this shit? They then cut her open and have the standard scene of them pulling out the organs and cracking bad jokes. I'm not gonna read them because at this point it's getting a little redundant. And then they keep the continuity by having Apple Bloom come in the end and help. This one definitely made me a bit uncomfortable because of the childlike nature in which Derpy is presented. But honestly, really good idea for a grimdark story, so can't really fault it. This one gives me a bit more of a lighthearted tone, and maybe you'll understand what I mean when we actually get into it. So Derpy's first project is a pony by the name of Roseluck, and she's strapped to the familiar table in the murder basement. Yeah, you know the one. Yeah, the one with the, yeah, okay, yeah. I'm not gonna lie, this one kind of makes me chuckle. "Hello," she said with a shy smile, her voice cracking. "My name is Derpy, and you're going to... She furrowed her brow and took an index card from beneath her wing, reading it. "You're going to help me make muffins." She gasped with a wide smile. "Muffins?" Dropping the card, she danced on the spot and then became a little shy again. Some pretty good character writing, methinks. Roseluck is there because Derpy drew her number. More on those later. Numbers, Pinkie. What do they mean? What do the numbers mean? What do they mean? Derpy tries to carve Roseluck's cutie marks off, but doesn't do it correctly again. So she gives up and calls for Pinkie Pie to come help her. Roseluck's response to seeing Pinkie Pie is, again, this is just another great exchange. "Pinkie Pie," Roseluck shouted, "what are you doing? Why are you teaching her these things? She doesn't know right from wrong. She's too stupid to know what she's doing." Pinkie Pie's expression became mutinous, and she suddenly ripped Roseluck's cutie mark all the way off with her teeth. Roseluck shrieked in pain, looking down at her bleeding flank. "Don't you dare call my Derpy stupid," Pinkie Pie screamed. "She is not stupid. You're stupid." Pinkie is written here as like an overprotective big sister, and honestly, yeah, I could totally see that dynamic working with these two characters. With the canon versions of them, anyway. Apple Bloom comes in with a pair of pliers, and Derpy uses them to pull Roseluck's teeth out, and then just fucking chucks them at her just as hard as she can, leaving welts and bruises and scrapes all over her skin. And then Derpy proceeds to turn the operating table upright and then proceeds to kick Roseluck in the legs until her legs are just completely fucked up. The story describes it, and I quote, as a couple of strangely shaped sticks by the time Derpy was done kicking them. You know, cue the usual, the gutting and the pulling out of the organs and the cheesy jokes. And I could read them out, but honestly, they're starting to feel corny at this point. By this point, I thought I was getting desensitized to the violence in these stories, and then I read the next one. Now, we take a break from Past Me to talk about another side story. Derpy's story. Derpy's story is a first-person story narrated by Derpy Hooves herself. Derpy talks about how she got her cutie mark, which was the last time she saw her mother when she got abandoned, and when Derpy finally did realize that her mother had left her there, she made her way to Ponyville. Once it was discovered by the locals that she had no home to return to, lived with other ponies who were also special. Derpy continues talking about how she lived at this home until she was old enough to live on her own. One day, Pinkie Pie offers Derpy the chance to move in with her at Sugar Cube Corner, and Derpy accepts. I lied when I said we were done with the backstory, I guess. I'm gonna throw it back to Past Me just one more time to talk about Payback. So this time around, there's no numbers involved. Derpy has kidnapped a stallion by the name of Spectrum, who it turns out was her bully back in flight school. So this time, it's personal. And I'm gonna be honest about this, I don't really know how much of this I can quote, because literally the beginning, Derpy goes off on a tirade like on Spectrum about how much he bullied her back in flight school for being different, and he called her the R word, and she goes on to use that word like several times, and I have no problem saying it in this context, but I'm pretty sure I'd get a community guidelines violation for saying it in a video, so I'm not taking a risk of that. The shit was different back then, what else can I say? Derpy also doesn't talk good in this story. They really lean into the mentally challenged aspect of the portrayal of the character, and well, here's a good example. I quote, "No pony is ever sorry. They laugh at Derpy because Derpy can't fly so good or talk so good. They talk behind Derpy's back. They talk real slow because they think Derpy can't understand fast talking." Yeah. I was really not expecting 3 of these to focus on Derpy Hooves, but here we are. Derpy saws Spectrum's wings off, throws hot coals at him, shoves one of the aforementioned hot coals into his mouth, burning the inside of his mouth. She rips his tongue out to stop him from screaming. I can't write shit like this. It's honestly just too ironic. I can't imagine how many kids with unfiltered internet access found this shit back in the day. I mean, I was like 14, 15 when I was first reading these. I can't imagine it. I can only imagine that there were like fucking like 10, 11, 12-year-olds reading this shit, man. Probably fuck some kids up. Oh well, a little trauma never hurt nobody. I mean, look, you know how this ends by now. Just fucking cut from fucking chin to dick, and gets his fucking organs ripped out, and the jokes, and the... it's getting a little tiring at this point. I'm actually starting to kind of lose my mind with this a little bit. So let's just move on. Thanks again, Past Me. Love your hair. Now, do you guys remember good old Minkie Pie from way back here? Well, now we're finally coming full circle with that, and we're going back to the rock farm with this one for the Revenge of Obsidian Pie. That's her actual name, by the way. It's Obsidian Minkie Pie. Minkie is a nickname now, because by this point, we now know their canon names, so now the sisters are Marble, Limestone, and Obsidian. Still not Maud, but at this point, Obsidian's a completely different character. This is the story of Inkie and Blinky finally discovering their long-lost older sister, Minkie Pie, who's been locked in the cellar for the last 20 years. They free her from her prison in the cellar and bring her to their murder cave, and after a couple weeks of nursing her back to health, she starts to take an interest in their baking. And one night, the 3 sisters finally decide that it's time to pay their parents a visit and get Minkie Pie her revenge. Oh, it's almost like that's the name of the story. It's the Revenge of it's the Revenge of Obsidian Pie. I get it. I'm a smart potato. If you thought that in this universe Pinkie Pie was crazy, Minkie's got nothing on her. Minkie is just a straight up fucking psychopath, which I guess, yeah, you would expect that from someone who spent most of their life in a basement. She's crazy, but she's like quiet kid in the back of class kind of crazy. Like, she doesn't look like she could hurt you, but if she wants to, she can fucking snap and whoop your ass. You can see where this is going. The three sisters butcher their parents while Minkie revels in their screams, and it ends on a rather ominous note with the three sisters leaving the rock farm to go reunite with Pinkie Pie in Ponyville. Also, I don't know where else to put this, but it's mentioned that Pinkie Pie is pink because it's a recessive gene inherited from their grandmother Rosie Quartz. Don't know why that needs to be there, but I guess she is the only pink one, and I guess it skips a generation. This brings us to the next main story, the Pie Sisters Reunited. This is a kind of more just connective tissue. It's a main story, I think, but it's just showing Inkie, Blinky, and Minkie arriving in Ponyville to meet up with Pinkie. You know, it just hit me why these names are so funny to say. Because they remind me of the ghost from Pac-Man. You know, Inkie, Blinky, Pinkie, and Clyde. You know, Inkie, Blinky, and Pinkie. And then Minkie, but you know, Minkie is Clyde in this case. All that happens here is Pinkie being introduced to her long-lost sister Minkie, and the sisters recanting to Pinkie the story of how they murdered their parents and baked them in the cupcakes, which they then present one of said cupcakes to Pinkie, which she eats happily. Now the Pie Sisters are all together again, which brings us to our next side story, Meet the Team. Aside from sounding like the name of a TF2 trailer, nothing of note really happens in Meet the Team, except for Inkie, Blinky, and Minkie being introduced to Apple Bloom and Derpy, and the rest of the main six as well. The main six don't exactly trust Minkie because she's really creepy. You know, she's not exactly the most well-adjusted pony. But at this point, they have officially formed the group that will from now on be known as the Bakers. No, not those Bakers. Although they're pretty cool too. Now we move on to Minkie Pie's turn. At this point, we are now 19 stories deep into this, and we're only halfway through. Now, Inkie, Blinky, and Minkie, I'm never gonna get tired of saying those names, have been in Ponyville for about a week now, and are eager to get back to their baking. After consulting the trusty number system, they finally come to the conclusion that their next victim will be a filly by the name of Cedar, who just so happens to be in Apple Bloom's class, and has a crush on her, so he'll be easy to lure in. I love convenience for the sake of the plot. Yeah, I'm sure you've already put the pieces together of what's going to happen, so let's just skip to the good part, right? Poor little Cedar wakes up in the murder basement, trademark. The one that looks like the set of a horror movie, with his horn broken off because magic is not allowed in the murder basement. As per the title, Minkie takes the lead on this one, and she's just the worst. She's the worst. She scares me. Minkie cuts off Cedar's cutie mark. That's basic. That's normal. That's what they usually do in these stories, right? She then has the other bakers play her fish hook game. Each baker gets a hook that is put through Cedar's lips and then tied to a line that they hold. And they each take turns asking him questions, and if he doesn't answer their questions right, they'll yank the hook out. How do you come up with that? How did she come up with that in the basement? Oh, I guess she didn't. She probably came up with it in the murder cave. There's one last grueling ordeal for this little guy before he finally kicks the bucket. Minkie decides to play one last game with Cedar, which consists of putting a light bulb in his mouth and then dripping hot candle wax onto his body to see how long he will last before involuntarily clenching his jaw, which he eventually does, breaking the light bulb, filling his already bloody mouth with broken glass, which Minkie then proceeds to try to force him to swallow said broken glass. Christ on a cross. This is just torture porn. There's no sugarcoating it. So anyway, they shoot him up with a sedative that will make his body numb, but then shoot him up with adrenaline to keep him awake. And then they harvest him. It's just, this is ending up being more mentally taxing than I initially thought it would be. Cupcakes was fun because I could make fun of it, and Rocket to Insanity was a personal favorite of mine. I don't have any personal attachment to this. It's just crazy. I don't know how else to put it. It's just torture. I just have a gut feeling that the worst is yet to come somehow, and that's what makes me nervous. Anyway, the story ends with the bakers concluding via the number system that their next target will be Applejack, and Applebloom decides to take the lead on her sister's murder. But before we can get into that, we got to put a pin in that, because we got some more filler arcs to get through. Starting with, did I not put it on here? Well, I forgot to put it on here, but Free Like a Pegasus. You want to go through Emotional Whiplash? Cool, because this one is actually a nice palate cleanser from the last one. So Minkie and Derpy have a really cute dynamic where they're kind of like trauma bonded sisters, and it's really cute and quirky. Derpy brushes Minkie's mane, and don't you skip ahead. I see you wanting to skip ahead. Don't you let me have this moment of bliss. Sorry about that. I can't. I just really wanted to take a bit of a break. Anyway, we now move on to our first in the series of the Mad Musings of Obsidian Pie, in which Obsidian Minkie Pie waxes philosophically about different things, the first of which being the game of life, and mostly death, to be honest. Basically, she's not afraid of dying, and I quote, "When I die, I'll know it'll be my time. I'll go with my eyes open and arms outstretched. Until then, I am your fear, for I can and will hurt you, but I am also your salvation. For I will release you from your suffering. I am here to guide you, you sick, sorry souls. And I crave your screams, and I find humor in your pleas, and I feel happy when the tears fall from your eyes. We're all playing the game, but only some of us have learned the proper strategy. The ball is in my court now. So far, my winning streak carries on." That's some savior complex she's got there. More emotional whiplash now, because we move on to Inkie Pie's birthday, and it's exactly what the title says. It's Inkie Pie's birthday. I'm not going into detail. Anyway, now that we got most of the side stories out of the way, we can get back to committing war crimes. Applejack is on the chopping block this time around, and I'm getting tired of reading these, to be honest. I mean, it's all the same basic formula. Get the pony to Sugar Cube Corner, get them drugged, get them into the murder basement, trademark. Torture porn, open-ended cliffhanger. Like, it's just the same. It's all the same. Look, I'll skip all the torture. Just Applebloom kills Applejack, harvests her sister's organs, and in the process earns her cutie mark, which is an apple with a chef's knife sticking out of it. They then feed the apple-flavored cupcakes made from Applejack's blood and viscera to the remainder of their friends, which is fucked on a whole psychological level because they don't know. But Fluttershy does start to feel that something is off, which I'm glad that after 2 of your friends have disappeared, you're finally putting the pieces together. But anyway, who wants to play dress up? As we have just a little girl time. Just a little time with the girlies. So, finally, another feel-good story. Look, I know I could skip most of these uneventful side stories, but I just like them. Most of them seem to serve as a nice palate cleanser from the more horrific stories. The girlies go to the Carousel Boutique where they play dress up and get some nice cute outfits, and Minkie starts to fixate on Fluttershy, which I'm sure won't be unhealthy and won't come up later. Who's ready for an Inkie Pie solo story, huh? Inkie Pie's stellar obsession. I'm so tired. I've been recording for like an hour and a half. Yeah, TLDR, Inkie sees a mare at the market named Stellar Burst. Oh, I get it, yeah. Stellar obsession. Okay, I get it. And she's, and I quote, jealous of her beauty, and then made her want to kill her. Valid. Inkie flirts with Stella and then eventually lures her to Sugar Cube Corner where she manages to drug her with some carrot juice. Creative. And I quote, she didn't want to tarnish the pretty fur, mane, and tail of the Pegasus. Anyway, Inkie went overboard on the drugs with Stella, so she's really unresponsive, which just pisses Inkie Pie off. So, by the time Applebloom and Pinkie come in, Inkie has let out all of her repressed aggression on Stella's corpse. She would then go on to turn Stella's hide into a pretty saddlebag. Just gorgeous. I'm running out of creative segues, but next up on the list is the penultimate story in the Muffins saga. Don't check the runtime of the video. This is it. This is it. I promise. At least I hope it is. The fun never ends. So by this point, the Bakers have kidnapped enough ponies to the point where Ponyville is finally starting to take notice. I mean, there's missing posters pretty much everywhere by this point, and the population has dwindled to the point where every pony is just staying inside to stay safe and avoid getting kidnapped. There was also an investigation to find Applejack, but nothing came up, which begs the question, what do the Bakers do with, like, the bones? Well, no, I guess that was answered. They use it to make furniture. Apparently, not even Princess Celestia can find the missing ponies, or at least any remains, which, alright, sure. I've suspended my disbelief so far, but you're telling me not even God can find these things? Okay. Fluttershy finally brings up to Twilight and Rarity that, hey, you know, don't you think it's a little weird that the day Applejack disappeared is the same day Applebloom got her cutie mark? I'm glad someone finally said it. Christ, took you long enough. Also, the amount of missing ponies increased exponentially after Pinkie Pie's sisters moved into town, so really you should have figured this out sooner. Twilight, Fluttershy, and Rarity all decide to go to Sugar Cube Corner, where they stumble upon the old murder basement trademark, where they discover the stuffed bodies of both Rainbow Dash and Applejack, which causes Twilight to vomit, which is, yeah, understandable. The trio get knocked out by the Pie Sisters, and Twilight and Rarity wake up with their horns broken off because there is no magic allowed in the murder basement. They then decide to have an entire villain monologue where they explain to our would-be heroes exactly the process of how they've been doing things, much to the horror of the two unicorns. Why am I doing this to myself? The answer, morbid curiosity, and for your entertainment. So, Minkie, with the help of Applebloom, cuts off Fluttershy's wings, and then sends Applebloom away to play with the others, because remember how I said earlier that Minkie was starting to fixate on Fluttershy? Yeah, it gets worse here. Derpy and Inkie are teasing Twilight to the point where she kind of just starts to have a mental breakdown. And while all that is going on, Inkie sews Rarity's mouth shut. Ironic, the seamstress getting her mouth sewn shut. Inkie then proceeds to jam various needles into random parts of Rarity's body until Applebloom gets the bright idea to have some fun with some piano wire. She ties the piano wire around Rarity's neck and then to the floor, and then raises the operating table, which in the process decapitates Rarity with her head landing in front of Twilight, which only worsens her fractured mental state at this point. Meanwhile, in the corner, Minkie Pie starts whipping Fluttershy with a rope with razor blades tied to it, leaving deep cuts on the timid mare. You know, it always disturbs me in these things when it's the most, like, timid / kind character that ends up getting, like, the worst shit imaginable done to them. It just makes me uncomfortable. The makeshift whip ends up getting stuck in Fluttershy's left eye, and Minkie just casually pulls Fluttershy's eye out, and it rolls across the floor, which causes the other bakers to burst out in hysterical laughter, because of course they find that funny. But thankfully, before the bakers can continue with their harvest, the Fuzz breaks in and arrests the Pie Sisters. But Applebloom and Derpy do manage to escape. Fluttershy manages to make a full recovery, but Twilight is left so mentally scarred by the events that she is confined to a mental hospital. But that's it, right? I mean, the Pie Sisters are in custody. The Murder Basement trademark has been shut down. I mean, you know, Derpy and Applebloom are still on the run, and that's a loose end, but realistically, that's the Muffins saga. What? What do you mean that's not the end? What do you mean she wrote more? Oh, fuck me, man. Apparently, The Fun Never Ends was actually intended to be the final chapter in the Muffins saga. However, due to a lot of demand and badgering from fans of the series, Ratana Senshin finally relented and decided to start writing more and take the series in a completely different direction. I'm not going to get into that whole situation with Ratana and her personal life. Rainbot has a great video on that topic, and they go into way more detail, and it's a good watch, honestly, if you want some added context for this. This is supposedly where I've been told things really start going off the rails. On Trial depicts, well, the Pie Sisters' trial, as they are tried for their crimes and eventually sentenced to death. Fair, but they don't stay in prison long enough for their sentence to be carried out, which brings us to Prison Break. This pic goes hard. Feel free to screenshot. Seriously, why do they look like they're about to drop like the hardest diss track on Princess Celestia? This story goes over how Derpy and Applebloom escaped from the police in The Fun Never Ends. Turns out Minkie tossed them aside and covered them in tools in a big old toolbox. And I guess the police just didn't bother sweeping the scene. Alright, not how that works, but whatever. And this story picks up with Derpy and Applebloom in the projects. No, I'm not joking, they're in the projects of Manhattan. But they're in Manhattan in order to enlist the help of Applebloom's cousin, Babseed. Remember from that story that one way back here? See? Told you the side stories would come up eventually. Anyway, to go through this whole plan of breaking the Pie Sisters out of prison, and it's mostly uneventful except for the actual prison break itself, this leads us to our next story, Grudge of a Bad Seed. I mean, realistically, this is just a story of how Babs got her cutie mark by poisoning her bullies with poisoned apple seeds. This, though, brings us to the new element of harmony. So, back in Sugar Cube Corner's basement, the good old murder basement trademark, well, except all of the murder tools have been cleaned out, it's just a regular basement again. The Bakers celebrate their successful escape from prison and welcome their newest member, Babseed, making the Bakers a total of 7. However, the party comes to a halt when they notice that Pinkie Pie isn't quite acting like herself, because she realizes that, hey, the elements of harmony are no more. Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity are all dead, Twilight's in the mental ward, and Fluttershy is Fluttershy. But they decide to brainstorm and dig a tunnel from the basement in Sugar Cube Corner to the murder dungeon in the castle in the Everfree Forest. And then they do that. I don't know how, but they do it. And as the last remaining element of harmony, Pinkie Pie decides to name each one of the Bakers as the new elements of harmony. So Applebloom is the element of determination, Derpy is the element of reliance, Inkie is the element of integrity, Minkie is the element of liberation, and Babs is the element of bravery. Pinkie finishes the conversation by knowing just exactly who Babs' first victim as a baker should be, Fluttershy. Which leads us to a farewell to kindness. It turns out Babs is just as crazy as the Pies because when Applebloom questions if she's actually ready to take another mare's life, Babs says this: Applebloom, you've got no idea what goes on in my head. I'm more than mentally prepared for this. I want this. I need this. Well, that's totally something a well-adjusted child would say. It's standard fare, except they're now in the murder dungeon, patent pending. Babs burns Fluttershy with hot cooking oil before harvesting her like the rest. They decide to use Fluttershy's corpse as a calling card outside of City Hall, and I quote, "There was a small table set up with a pink tablecloth that was patterned with blue and yellow balloons. On the surface sat the severed and near unrecognizable head of Fluttershy, which was discolored, bloody, and missing the top part of her skull. Her skin was leathery in texture, and her remaining eye had also been gouged out. In front of the head sat a plate of 6 pretty cupcakes and 6 muffins, as well as a large sign hanging from the front of the table. It had 3 words written in blood. We're still here. Yeah, this one hurt me on a deep emotional level that I can't quite put into words. I have an obligation to see this through, both to myself and to you. So we're almost at the end, for real this time. But first we have to take another detour into the mad musings of Obsidian Pie, the topic of this time being my curse. More insane musings from everyone's precious small bean with a death wish. Minkie believes that love is a curse, and she's afraid that it makes her weak. Ah, yes, the good old love is useless. It makes you weak argument. I mean, that's really it. She's just getting pretentious at this point. Anyway, moving on to Twilight's fall. So Babs goes to visit Twilight in the mental hospital to set with the sole purpose of setting back her recovery about 12 steps by informing her of the baker's return. This obviously distresses Twilight, which causes her to jump out of the window. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think mental wards are supposed to have bars on the windows to prevent this exact thing. But whatever, we're not going for realism at this point. Who wants a Danganronpa style killing game? Huh? Do you want that? Because that's exactly what we get with the Final Crusade. Well, not to be confused with the Indiana Jones movie, The Last Crusade. This is the final hurrah for the last of the CMC, both Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, I'm afraid. Babs convinces the girls to go visit Sakura, but when they get there, they are met with Sakura's corpse pinned to the wall of her hut. And then Babs just sucker punches both of them, knocking them out. Seriously, she just cold cocks them. It's impressive. The two fillies then wake up in the murder dungeon, patent pending, in what I can only describe as a saw trap. See, the way it's designed is that they have 24 hours to escape, but the only way they can escape is by filling a meter. And the only way to fill the meter is by causing pain to themselves. Alright, which they actually do manage to do, and the cage door opens, but upon stepping out, Sweetie Belle is immediately impaled by spikes that come out of the floor. Well, that's not fair. So yeah, the bakers were never really intending to let them escape. They were just having fun. Scootaloo does actually manage to escape the castle and fly for the first time, but unfortunately, Derpy catches up with her and stabs her to death. And at this point, I'm starting to run out of sarcastic quips, so let's just move on to the grand finale. Well, it's not the grand finale, but it feels like one, and you'll see what I mean. Let's welcome Chaos, which is split up into 3 days. On the first day, the bakers enact their plan to kill all of Celestia's royal guards, and somehow they succeed. I couldn't tell you how. Well, actually, I can. Poor writing and plot armor, that's how. On day 2, the Pies go around systematically slaughtering all of the surviving ponies in Ponyville. I have no idea how this group of misfits can get any of this done, but hey, it makes for good television, right? On the 3rd day, God, it sounds like I'm talking about the resurrection of Christ or something. The final part of the plan comes to fruition on day 3, where the Pies seek out to get revenge on the cops that arrested them in the first place. But first, they perform just a bit of casual domestic terrorism as Derpy and Applebloom go to the weather factory and just fuck everything up. We're talking crossing hot and cold, steam with heat, until eventually the weather factory fucking explodes. Those closest to it perished from severe 4th degree burns and inhalation of chemicals. Now, for those unfamiliar, 4th degree burns are to the bone. Just to put that in perspective. Others were either killed or injured by metal debris colliding with their bodies, but they had been the lucky ones. The explosion had sent a gas wave over the city, being sucked up by harsh winds, twirling clouds, and violent tornadoes. The lightning touched everything it could, starting many fires all at once. The tornadoes had picked up the flames, spreading them even quicker, burning anything or anyone in its path. More explosions came in rapid succession as electricity and fire met with the gas wave. The snowstorm skipping an entire phase of matter, producing thick, heavy, boiling steam. And Discord will be proud, because this is some grade A chaos they are spreading here. They then kill the cops that arrested them and separated their family, and then proceed to send a letter to Princess Celestia. Okay, we're finally building up to a head. Obviously, there's going to be a big conflict between the bakers and the princesses, so it should be good, right? Right? A nice, big, resounding, satisfying climax. right? Which brings us to the final story in the saga, Sting. Here we are. The final story in the Muffins saga. Aside from the mad music of Obsidian Pie, happiness, but again, just more schizo posting. Nothing important really happens. I'm moving on. I'm passing over it, okay? It's up there. I mentioned it. It's there. In Sting, we follow a unicorn by the name of Cascade as she infiltrates the now barriered off Ponyville in an attempt to infiltrate the bakers and destroy them from the inside. Oh, I get it. That's why it's called Sting. She's a Fed. So I thought this is where the saga would finally end, right? Cascade would succeed in her task at infiltrating and destroying the bakers, and the day would be saved and Equestria could finally rest in peace, right? But that's not what happens. Cascade's cover gets blown, and she gets tossed into a solitary confinement cell in the murder castle, and well, apparently she was trained for something like this, but her training wasn't even anything like this, because it's like, well, I had a room, but it wasn't this small, and there was low light. It's like, okay, then that wasn't really solitary training, because you're tossed in a fucking 1x2 room with no light and no windows and no nothing, and you're not even gonna be able to fucking handle it, you pussy. Anyway, the story ends with Celestia and Luna watching a video that the bakers send them. They have video cameras. That's totally something that was established. I don't know who held it. None of them have magic. Who cares? Where they unveil that they are now 7 members strong, and the story ends with Celestia realizing that the way to beat the bakers might be using Luna's ability to project herself into Pony's dreams. That's it. That's it. That's it. All of this, just to end on a cliffhanger. I slogged through all of this shit just to end on a cliffhanger and not even get a satisfying ending? Okay, so apparently this is just the point where Retaina just finally had enough and called it quits, which, fair enough, considering the fact that by this point she was practically being forced to keep writing these stories, so it's understandable. According to the wiki, there were several more stories planned before the saga would come to an official end. The titles could have been Pinkie Pie's Apprentice, When Bubbles Pop, The Mad Musings of Obsidian Pie, Reality, Splatter, Kamikaze, and a final untitled finale. Now, according to Retaina herself, if the last chapters would have been written, one of the potential endings could have been all of the bakers becoming alicorns and taking over Equestria, which, funnily enough, mimics the ending of another Muffins fanfiction. Yes, Muffins has its own fanfictions. No, I'm not going to get into them here. Called Return of the Bakers, where a similar plot point happens. I mean, despite all the blood and gore, reading all of these in chronological order has actually been kind of enjoyable. It was a nice ride. There's a lot of nice backstory and elements and character moments. And yes, it's gore, and yes, it could potentially be called torture porn. And, you know, Retaina's not actually a bad writer. I think her work is actually pretty good as far as this is concerned. But the stories like All That Glitters and When Rocks Break and, you know, Meet the Team or Just a Little Girl Time or Free Like a Pegasus are actually really enjoyable stories. Regardless of your opinion on Retaina as a person, Muffins lives in infamy. I mean, hell, people are still talking about it. I'm talking about it right now, so people remember it, and you probably remember it if you clicked on this video, or maybe you've never heard of it before and you were just curious. But Muffins is a long, winding road full of twists and turns and shark jumps and bullshit, and it's honestly just, it's a beautiful disaster, is the best way I can describe it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked, consider leaving a like and subscribing. And, you know, leave suggestions for more stories you'd like me to cover. They don't have to just be creepypastas or grimdark. They can be whatever. I just won't read Clop. I don't do that. That's where I draw the line. I think I actually need to detox from grimdark stories for a while before I can do another one of these. I'm the Wildcard, and I will see you next time. Peace.